Hello, my name is Horror, and today I have found a few strange encounters people have experienced with the various mythical and supernatural forces of the world from multiple subreddits, and I will be narrating them here. But before we begin, I did want to ask that if you end up enjoying my narrations, then please do consider liking and subscribing, as that really does help the channel a lot. But either way, without any further ado, let's get into the narrations. The first story is imposed by user LiveTech. Back in the summer of 2020, I was traveling with my partner to Boise, Idaho, from Colorado to visit his family and stay for a camping trip. This trek is usually 15 hours long, and while you can do it in the day, it's better if you stop to rest. Having lived in Utah at one point in time, I was very eager to show him the natural hot springs in the Spanish Fork. They are located deep in Diamond Fork Canyon and require a 45-minute hike from the parking lot. Still, we were both excited to get out and moving after 7 hours in the car. When we arrived at the first parking lot, however, the gate was shut and locked tight. A sign taped to the metal read, "Closed. Absolutely no access to hot springs. Fines $2,000 max." Or something of that nature at least. We were bummed. COVID had shut down many things, and we figured that this was outside, so there was no way it was going to be closed. After some research on the government website, we discovered that a body had been possibly found in the springs and was likely the cause for the locked gate. Sad and tired of sitting in the car, we drove back down the canyon road to find a spot to camp for the night. Most of the more established campsites were closed due to COVID or were already taken for the night. This was fine since we prefer more dispersed camping anyways. So we picked a random road to turn on as we drove to the exiting canyon. Road 338. Most of the road was a well-kept dirt road. We passed some promising spots near a creek and maybe 2 or 3 other people already set up for the night. We wanted to go a little further to see if there was anything with that wow factor. Sounds funny, but some sites give off that this is the one feeling. Finally, we came to a dead end in the main road with a fire mitigation row to the right. At this very spot, there was a strange boulder with some type of inscription on it, partially surrounded by a wooden fence. I had to investigate. The inscription read, "Diamond Battle, June 20th, 1866. No way! A memorial for a battle that happened right here. A feeling of uneasiness and oddly respect washed over me. After traveling up the fire road and not finding what we were hoping for in the campsite, we decided to pick a spot by the small creek we passed on the way in. It was getting dark quickly, but we set up our tent in no time at all and got a fire going. The creek was loud, but peaceful, though ever since I read that inscription, I couldn't shake this feeling. I'm not a paranoid person, but I kept feeling on the edge of my seat, like something was watching us from the woods just across the water. As the night grew darker, this feeling grew stronger. I decided I didn't want to be in the open anymore and retreated to the tent to get some rest while my partner stayed up to enjoy the fire. I snuggled into our sleeping bag and exhaled comfortably. listening to the creek that was now much quieter and was a bit further from the tent. I started to drift off when I heard it. Soft chanting, rhythmic drums. My eyes shot open. Was I really hearing that? I strained my ears to listen over the running water. I couldn't quite get a clear sound, but it was definitely there. This is when I noticed the ground was also rumbling, as if horses were stampeding down the road 100 feet from our sight. I didn't know if I should get out to tell my partner, but I had a strange feeling that if I said it out loud, it would make it more true, and that an army of spirits would spring from the trees and into our campsite. Before I could make the decision, I was dead asleep. This was somehow the most peaceful slumber I have ever had. The next morning, we packed up our tent and left no trace that we had ever spent the night by the Little Diamond Creek. When I finally entered cell service, I did a Google search of that memorial and Diamond Fork, Utah. It turns out there was a battle between the Utes and the Mormon militia, and lives were lost on that mountainside. After reading this, I decided to tell my partner what I heard last night before falling asleep. I told him about the chanting and the drumming, and even the stomping of horses. He looked at me in disbelief and said that he heard the same exact thing. I guess I was only in the tent 10 minutes before he got spooked standing alone by the fire, hearing this distant chanting and drums. He came into the tent and experienced that same restful sleep I had. I feel as though we were being watched over by those Native Americans that lost their lives there. A strong but calm and protective presence. If you're ever on Diamond Fork Road, I hope you visit and pay respects to the memorial of the Diamond Battle, and maybe, just maybe, the spirits of the land will watch over you too. The next story has been posted by user Faded Character. Let me preface this with the fact my family has been in the Ozarks of Missouri or Kansas since before the Civil War. It is a weird and wonderful place with a lot of characters living in it. We are very rarely scared running through these woods, but it is probably due to the fact we know the weird woods and the oddballs who live in it. Our version of the missing 411 is some yahoo getting too drunk on green whiskey and passing out under a tree for a day after leaving the bootleg still up in a cave. Yes, an elderly woman was arrested a couple of years ago for running a moonshine operation. Drugs changed a lot of people here, but even if you run into somebody cooking something in the woods, wet weather creek beds and Mountain Dew are their favorite. Just greet them and continue on your way because they'll be gone in half a day. In the early 80s, my brother, Steve, age 16, went to the northern Missouri flatland with his best friend, Mike, to visit his relatives who were farmers. We grew up to be rather independent. Driving a car by age 12 was the status quo amongst country kids. So aside from being required to go to church, we were pretty much allowed to do whatever we wanted, and it sounds like it was no different for them there. They had a lot of fun, goofing around, and had great stories of what they did. But one story sticks out in my mind. Late one night, they were in my brother's old, hot rod Mustang driving down the long, straight and narrow dirt roads of the farm county. We live in the Rocky Hills. When the road became a very tight one lane with the fences lined so overgrown with trees they were a canopy over the road. It can be odd to see overgrown roads in that area because fertile, flat land is a precious commodity. He said they were creeping along because they didn't want to run into a dead end with a fence and tear the car up. Headlights were definitely not the same as now. And something about this place just seemed funky, in my brother's words. Along the lane, they passed a drive with a chained up wire hog panel as a gate. In the moonlight, they could see an old two-story farmhouse that had collapsed in on itself, with a traditional big barn beside it looking like it was going to do the same at any time. There wasn't a pole light that most people keep around, only the moonlight. They continued on as the roads seemed to get even more overgrown, talking about whether they should just attempt to back up the half mile to the farm's driveway and turn around. Finally, they could see ahead that the road opened up to some sort of a clearing, and as they pulled into it, the road suddenly ended at an old iron gate with a makeshift sign reading Coon Cemetery. They were at a graveyard. By this time, they had spooked themselves out. They were somewhat lost and had just creeped down some overgrown road to end up at a graveyard in the middle of the night. Steve managed to turn the car around and head back, going a little faster than before. As they started nearing the driveway to the rundown farm, they could just make out something very tall and glowing white in the driveway of the old place. As the headlights hit the drive and the apparition, they realized it was a ghostly white giant old man around 6'4", standing by the side of the road, wearing only pants and no shoes, just calmly waving at them. Needless to say, they hightailed it out of there, and they both could have cared less if he scratched his car or not. He told us that over 30 years ago, and I've never forgotten it. The next story is posed by user Difficult Boss 7620. Hello there. I recently had a very strange experience, and I just can't make heads or tails of it. So I was wondering if anyone could tell me about what I just might have seen. Thank you. Situation number 1. I was at my grandma's house in the upstairs bedroom. It's a old 4-bedroom house on the countryside. And I'm laying in bed watching Netflix on my phone on the nightstand. There's a door to my grandma's bedroom that's a catty-cornered to the door in the room I'm sleeping in. So, I'm laying there watching Forensic Files or something, and so my view is kind of distorted from the light on the screen. But I see a black figure walk up and grab the doorknob of the door to the other bedroom, and it just stands there. I'm thinking it's my grandma who is downstairs. She's kind of hard of hearing, so I say, "Grandma," a few times, louder and louder, until the hair stands up on the back of my neck, and I lean up in my bed and say, "Grandma," really loud. At this point, whatever it is knows I'm looking at it and replies to me, "Oh, you can see me?" and turns around and walks away. I didn't know what to do. I sat there for a minute and then got up and looked through all the other bedrooms, but nobody was up there. I go downstairs and my grandma's sitting there watching Jeopardy like usual. I asked her if she went upstairs, and she said no, and has no idea what I'm talking about. I'm not schizophrenic, at least that I know of, and I was completely sober. It freaked the hell out of me. Situation number 2. Fast forward 6 months, and it's New Year's. Long story short, I'm laying in the other bedroom that was catty-cornered to the one that I was in the first time, in and out of sleep, and a crazy hungover. I hear a woman mumbling down the hallway by the bathroom. I don't think anything of it, since anyone could just be going there to use the bathroom. I laid there for a while, just listening, but the mumbling didn't stop even after a considerable amount of time, and while listening to it, I couldn't make out any words. So I go downstairs and ask my mom and my grandma, who are both sitting there on the other end of the house in the living room watching TV, if there was anyone there. My mom said no, so I told her that I heard some lady upstairs mumbling. She just replied that no one was there, and so I went back upstairs and tried to get some sleep. Maybe I was just imagining it. As soon as I am barely asleep, I'm laying on my side, and I hear a scream from a girl less than 3 inches from my left ear. I was so scared that I jumped up and ran into the door, then opened it and ran out. Fast forward again to later that night, and my mom spending the night at my apartment. She doesn't live in town, since she was just visiting. My mom said that she hears the lady too some mornings, just mumbling down the hallway, but she can never make out what it's saying. She just didn't want to say anything in front of my grandmother to freak her out. My grandma doesn't believe in ghosts. I just refuse to sleep over there anymore. Hell no. Do you guys have any possible ideas on what this thing could have been? The house was built by my grandfather and his first wife who lived there. They had a young daughter who died of some blood disease. I'm not sure what it was, but apparently it's curable today. But to this day, whenever I'm in the house, I get some really strange anxiety. I bought an audio recorder and set it up there for 3 days. I went through all the recordings on my girlfriend's laptop, but I can't hear anything, except for some interference every now and then. But it might just be the recorder's fault. Can you guys think of any way I could get any audio from it? Or maybe a video? I don't know much about this stuff, and have no idea what I saw, or what this thing could be, or even if it's real or not. Please help. The next story has been posed by user Darkflaw777. I saw a demon when I was little. I'm 32 now. This is probably my first memory. I started kindergarten early, so I had to be 3 when this happened. I might have just turned 4. My mom didn't see it, but she will vouch for me since she saw the pure terror in my face. And according to her, I wasn't the type of kid who imagined stuff or made things up. I grew up in a double-wide trailer. One morning I was sitting on the couch watching cartoons while my mom was in their bathroom getting ready. When I looked to the right, something was in the kitchen, staring at me, smiling. Its head was almost touching the ceiling, so it was easily over 6 feet tall. It came into the living room, towering over me, just smiling. It had big, sharp yellow teeth and fiery red eyes. It took a huge knife in my face, then continued to walk through the living room into the hallway. I promptly bolted out of the living room, through the kitchen, into my parents' room, and jumped into the bed. My mom came out of the bathroom a few minutes later and found me under the covers, in their bed, hysterically crying. She was so convinced she grabbed the steak knife out of the drawer in the kitchen and went towards the hallway and into my brother's room, where this thing was headed. I've googled the description of this creature, and I feel like others have seen something similar. I won't go into all the details of my misfortune, but I feel like this thing has followed me my entire life in spirit. In one argument my mom and I had a few years ago, she called me a tortured soul. I've never told this story to Reddit. I really hope somebody can shed at least some light on this story. The next story has been posed by user Angel of Music 5. I'm not even sure where to begin with this. I just wanted somewhere to talk about this with people who won't think I'm crazy. I work at this school/daycare program, and there's a demon in it, or possibly several. As someone who has never had a, for certain, paranormal experience, this was a hard pill to swallow. My belief was always more of a, oh well, it could be real, I guess. And I am not enjoying finding out for sure. This is awful. It's terrifying and nerve-wracking, and I want to throw up just thinking about going to work tomorrow. I am searching for a new job as hard as I can, but it's going really slowly. It started in a specific toddler room called T5. Since I started working there, I never liked going in that room. I couldn't put my finger on why exactly, but I hated it. I thought it was just the kids that were really out of control, really mean and aggressive for toddlers. But it ended up being far more than that. I was in there, giving a break to their main teacher. I'm a substitute, and all the kids were taking a nap. Their room was dark, no sound except a quiet white noise machine. Then I heard something around the corner at the sink. The dishes start clinging, like someone is doing the dishes. It's a Montessori school, so we have real dishes. I looked around the corner, and nothing was there. I sat back down, and it started again. I shrugged it off. Next time I was in there, the closet door opened by itself. I still tried to shrug it off. Other things were happening too. I noticed I was suddenly having a lot of weird health problems, mostly related to reproductive stuff. I was getting bad dizzy spells and double vision, but I didn't make the connection that it was only happening at work and only when I was in T5 or adjacent rooms. Then another teacher who I'd become friends with mentioned offhand that she and her daughters, who also had worked there, had felt like the place had really negative energy. When I asked what she meant, she tentatively admitted that she'd seen weird things. Without me telling her first, I asked what she saw, and she also described the dishes, the doors opening, hearing a deep voice speaking from the damn ceiling, and dizzy spells and other weird health stuff. She also told me, I don't have any proof of this or anything, that her former co-teacher saw this stuff as well. She also had two unexplained miscarriages while she worked there, and now that she quit, she's pregnant again and almost due with no complications. This teacher also told me that the former main teacher of T5 had been into occult stuff. I don't know if this was true or not, since I only met her once, and all I noticed was that she was a really snappish and negative person who no one else could really stand. She quit a week after I started. I do, however, know that three current teachers are also into occult stuff, based on their social media posts at least. All three also bullied me and another teacher over being Christian. After that, it got worse. I felt like I was being targeted or attacked. I feel dizzy, like the floor is tilting almost the entire time when I'm there. My body gets weirdly racked with pain that doesn't subside till I leave the building. This horrible dark depression comes over me, like life is pointless. I close my eyes and see glimpses of knives cutting my skin. During nap time, when the kids are asleep, is always when the thing really acts up. In T5, dishes clink every time. Once, the sink even turned on. Then, whatever it was started knocking glasses on the floor. Another day during nap time, I got my air cut off for about 5 seconds, like something had me by the throat. Then, one of the almost 2-year-olds pointed to the doorway of the classroom and nervously said, "There's a ghost in there." She and another child often stared at something towards the ceiling and burst into uncontrollable crying and screaming. Sounds like claws tapping on the glass window happen all the time, and shadow figures glide past the big outside windows. The other day, another teacher, who I had not talked about any of this, nervously told me that the bathroom door in her classroom closed itself and clicked locked, despite the fact that it scrapes on the floor and has to be pushed really hard to close. Prior to this, my work bestie, the only other religious employee, had been the only one to say she'd seen stuff. She quit shortly after. Now, a third teacher, not religious, had seen stuff as well. Then, last week, I saw it. It was like a black diamond shape in the air, above the shoulder and a little bit behind a teacher standing in the hallway. The shape was kind of like a cloak draped, but mostly just a black mass with blurry edges. The head wasn't really describable. The closest thing would be a cross between a vulture skull and a plague doctor mask. I only saw it for a second and literally jumped out of my skin, but I saw it. It's worth noting that the teacher it was behind is a complete a-hole who probably shouldn't even be working with kids, and he has weird mood swings and alternates between hitting on female teachers and acting aloof, and yells at the kids a lot. Today I was supervising napping kiddos in an older classroom. That class had one autistic boy who is not very verbal. He was sound asleep, and I was sitting in a chair between him and the bathroom. I suddenly began to feel really cold, and the familiar "I'm being watched" feeling. So I knew something was in there. Then I heard things being scooted around in the bathroom. It was quiet enough not to wake up the kid sleeping right by the bathroom, but the little, non-verbal boy suddenly woke up, pointed at something, and screamed. He isn't like that at all. I ran and hugged him and said, "Get out," at the thing. It took a few minutes, but the feeling faded, and the little boy laid back down. I have gotten enough confirmation that this stuff is real. How do you even deal with this? I feel traumatized. I hate this. I can only talk about it for sure with one teacher, but everybody in the building acts dark and depressed. I'm having night terrors, anxiety attacks are increasing, just from having to go to work and be around this. If other people weren't experiencing it too, I would think I was going insane. But others have, and the kids see stuff. Plus, I only experience stuff at work. Everything is fine as soon as I'm not in the building. Please, let me know if you've seen an entity like this before, and if you know what this could be, and any advice you can give me on how to deal with it and that fear would be very appreciated. The next story is posed by user W11104444. I want to preface before that I've always somewhat believed in these type of creatures, aliens, skinwalkers, wendigo, spirits, etc. But I've always been the kind of person who doesn't fully believe in something unless I've experienced it myself. I've always just thought that it's possible, so why not? But of course, just like anyone else who hasn't experienced something, I had my doubts. Also, I wanted to add that I'm not the person to be scared of entities. When it comes to what I believe and how I see spirits, I have never been scared of them. I understand them, and I have always connected with them. Last night, I was with my partner and our friend, and we were all at a place called Rafe's Chasms in Gloucester, Massachusetts. We got there about 9:30 p.m., and we were just going to have a fire on the rocks by the water. You had to walk through some wooded areas to get to the rocks, and as we pulled up to the area, I had this strange, bad feeling for some reason. I usually trust my intuition, but I told myself I was just psyching myself out. Once we got to the spot, I immediately felt that same weird feeling again, but I told myself I was just making things up. Even so, I didn't turn my back to the open space, and was instead turned facing towards the woods and the rock area. As the people I was with watched the fire, I stared out into the darkness, feeling like something was watching us. I decided to go to a rock further away from the fire so my eyes could adjust to the darkness. And lo and behold, I see a translucent white figure about 50 feet away from us on top of the rocks on the other side of the area, quite high up. It was moving back and forth, and it looked to be about 5 to 6 feet tall. It starts to scale down the rocks, and when I say scale, I mean fast, like faster than humanly possible. And as it's doing that, it gets smaller and turns into the shape of an animal, like a coyote or a wolf. I say, "Is that an animal?" And my partner looks over and immediately gets super sketched out. The other person we were with wasn't bothered by it for some reason. He said he saw it, but in the moment was trying to convince us it was a person. He was quite drunk, to be fair. As I see it coming towards us, I get absolutely horrified that it's going to kill us. I try to go higher up on the rocks to get away from it. I literally thought that that was it. I thought I was going to die. I had the most horrifying feeling, and it was genuinely the scariest, most terrifying thing I have ever felt or seen. I pulled out my phone and shined my flashlight on it to make sure I'm not tripping, and I think that it deterred whatever it was away from us because it ended up running into the woods and disappearing. My partner and I were completely horrified, and my legs were violently shaking. I said that we need to leave immediately. The friend that we were with wanted to stay to finish his drink, but we wanted to go. He told us that he would prove that it was a human by trying to run down the rocks as fast as he could to prove that a human could go that fast. But when he did, we could hear him running all around. And that's the scary part about what we saw. It was completely silent as it went down the rocks and back up them. We weren't able to process what had just happened, and we had gotten home after we dropped our friend off. When we did, we decided to do some research about cryptids and the area where we were. Here's what we found. The first few things that come up when you Google the location are several articles of deaths that have occurred right where we were. Now, each one states that the deaths were from the waves knocking the people off and drowning them. But this wasn't what freaked us out. I continued to scroll, and I came across this weird website. It was a website for stock photos, but for some reason, the description included the name of the location we were. When I clicked the website, I literally could not believe what I saw. The image of whatever creature that is looked a lot like what we had seen earlier that night. It couldn't have been a coincidence. We still have no idea what to make of this situation, but all I know is I am still scared. Has anyone else experienced something like this? As we reach the end of our exploration into the enigmatic, I want to express my gratitude for joining me on this adventure. The realm of the unexplained holds an irresistible allure, one that draws us in with its tantalizing secrets. Regardless of your beliefs, I hope you enjoyed my narrations and want to wish you a good rest of your day, embracing the mysteries that lie ahead.